Now camera speed. Like how you don't like to show the other side of that vlog.
Maybe at the end I'll do a little flash. It can be like a build-up, you know? And then at the end they're like, whoa, what a fucking nerd. My mom gave me this.
It's a good mug. You just have to own it, you know?
I should have put on all the things I got for my family for Christmas. The pajama bottoms. That's it. The mug and some perfume.
Cute. Sweet. So let's start, if you want to, like, say your name, and then just, like, say that you were one of the... Actually, say your name, and then can you say kind of where you originally came from, and then kind of, like, what led you to the Bay?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Hello. Hello, everyone. No, just kidding.
No. Just talk to me and just,
okay,
like...
Cool. Should I look at that or at you?
You can look at me.
Cool. Well, my name is Shawna Shawnté Scroggins, and I'm from Phoenix, Arizona. I came to the Bay about 12 years ago, and what brought me here was that I didn't see a future for myself in Arizona. I was just like partying, and I don't know. I just was like writing in my journal like I have to leave Arizona by the end of, I think it was 2006. And I was like, by December 31st, 2006, I don't care what I have to do. I'm not going to be in Arizona anymore. And, like, I had gone to jail twice that year for traffic violations. Like, multiple day sentences. And I was in Tent City, which was finally closed down. But it's, like, basically a jail that's outside. And I was there in the middle of summer for 4 days for driving on a suspended license. So I just felt like things were really harsh. I felt really like, I don't know. I was like, I don't know what's going to happen to me if I stay here. So I just always admired California. I spent my summers in San Jose with my aunt as a teenager. And so I just met some guy, and he moved out here 2 months after we started dating, and I came with him. And then I dumped him and became gay.
Why do you think, like, you couldn't continue in Arizona? Yeah, maybe. I know, I'm all, like, crouching down.
Let me get you a chair, and that's not going to last long.
I'm in Aries, you know how it is.
I know how we are.
We'll sit uncomfortably for like 5 hours.
That's why I had to help you out. You weren't even going to help yourself out.
I'm trying. But like, speaking of Arizona, like, what was it? Like, did you just feel like there wasn't that same support? What was it about San Francisco or the Bay that felt like you could be you know?
Well, I think that, like, if you're from the Southwest, like, I'm from Arizona, we always, like, not, like, idolize California, but look up to California. Or not look up, that's the wrong word, but romanticize. So it's, like, I knew that, like, when I came here for New Year's Eve 2001, it was one of the best nights of my life, just walking around the Embarcadero with my cousins and going to, like, catching the bus and talking to everyone. And I saw, like, more Black people than I have been used to seeing in Arizona. And also more, like, I wasn't considered, like, I wasn't looked at like a freak, like the way I was back home. And also, when I spent my summers as a teenager in San Jose, like, the group of people that I would hang out with were all, like, wannabe rappers or producers, and we just always had a good time. So, honestly, I had only been to San Francisco once before I moved there for, like, a day. And I just followed my heart.
Yeah.
That was it. I actually like overdrew my account by $120 to buy a one-way plane ticket to get here. So when I moved here, I had one suitcase and negative $120.
Was like your first spot the co-op, or did you move?
No, I actually lived in Daly City first. Daly City! Fucking love Daly City. But I lived there for on and off for a while because, like, when I broke up with the guy I was dating, I lived in the Excelsior for a while, and eventually I ended up at the 22nd Street Co-op in San Francisco's Mission District. And I lived there for almost 7 years.
How was it living at the co-op? Like, maybe you can describe, because, like, people don't know.
Yeah.
What is the co-op? And you can say the full name. Like.
Yeah, so it was called the 22nd Street Co-op, and it was like a collective household with a lot of shared responsibilities around chores and shopping and money. And what drew me to it was the radical language that they used to describe it. It felt like what I always thought of, like, imagined or daydreamed about living in. Like, they're like, we're people of color and artists, and I don't know, like, I don't even remember what they said back then. But I just was like, I want to give it a shot because I wanted to live in San Francisco. I didn't want to move out here and live in Daly City. So the whole time I lived in Daly City, I was coming to San Francisco every night and catching the 14 home at like 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, whatever. And what drew me to it, there was something about the description, the language. I was new back then. I didn't know any of the, like, political language and stuff. But I was, like, open-minded, like, queer people, artists, like, activists. So I went and applied to live there. It's, like, I think at any time 7 to 9 people lived there. And they actually didn't want me to live there. Most of the people, they thought I was, like, a normative straight girl. Which was kind of foreshadowing, like, a lot of times these communities that we like romanticize as like weirdos that haven't found our path yet, like sometimes they become like dogmatic and closed off. But by the grace of God and Amal and Naomi, they like argued with all the other 5 people, and they're like, no, we want her to live here. She's not like everybody else, and that's refreshing. And so I moved in there, and that was really like my queer education and my education into like finding the words to describe this like radical or just this like political ideology. Not like that's the wrong word, but finding the words to describe and explain things that I didn't have the words for before. Like, oh, when I was dating the white guy that I moved here with, and he would constantly like paint pictures of black women and of Sarah Bartman and like really accentuate like our like bodies, and it always rubbed me the wrong way. But then when I moved into the co-op, I was like, oh, he's fetishizing black women. You know, like I literally didn't have that basic of a language for that sort of thing when I moved here. And so what happened is I was in a lot of situations that were like isolating and upsetting, and I didn't really know why. So I'm thankful that I learned the words to describe those things and name those things, even though sometimes I think people take language too far.
What do you mean by take language too far? Like,
they might assume that everyone has to use the same words as them, or they're not as like radical or creative or smart. But actually, like a lot of radical politics that I grew up with, just being like in a large black family or being in Phoenix, Arizona, where people really had to look out for each other, and maybe people don't use like that language, but they're doing it, you know? And then those same people that say that they're down for, like, the working class or, like, people in the hood, they can't even, like, have a conversation because they're so used to, like, only talking to people that talk just like them.
Yeah.
I'm all disillusioned.
No, but I hear you. I mean, I think it's like we talked about academic privilege and when people kind of like become insular because of that. And it's like, well, politically you're saying all of this, but you aren't actually like living it.
Exactly.
You know?
And the people you're claiming to rep don't even want to hear you talk because it's dry as fuck.
Yeah.
And it's convoluted.
And it's like, sometimes maybe you shouldn't be talking. You should actually be listening.
Right. It's a good one.
So like going into San Francisco.
Oh, there's my dogs. I'm gonna shut the door. You guys. Come on. Everyone who's watching this, I know it's disgusting. I love my dogs in the bed. I'm a disgusting person. I don't let them in the blankets, though.
Love it. I've always appreciated like it's like, you know, you're from Arizona, but then you like moved to San Francisco, and I feel like you just like really learned about the history of San Francisco. So I'd love to like hear you just kind of break down what you know about the history of San Francisco, Oakland, but it doesn't have to be in depth, but I think like applying it to Universes Lit, because I think a lot of people don't realize how large like different communities of color were in San Francisco at one point, specifically like Black community.
Yeah.
You know?
My favorite, one of my favorite things about San Francisco is the, like, history of music. So, like, I love Sugar Pie DeSanto and Etta James and stuff like that. And, like, they were from San Francisco. So, I guess in terms of history, like, one thing that really stood out to me with San Francisco. Okay, going back to Take This Hammer with James Baldwin. So he's in the Bayview Hunters Point, and I don't know, the film was in black and white, so the shit is old. But no, just kidding. I think it was like the 50s or something, late 50s. And literally these people in Bayview Hunters Point are like, they're kicking us out, they're evicting us, they're taking over our neighborhoods. So it's like a long continuation. Like right now people are talking about gentrification, and it's such a long history. Like these things in terms of city planning and public policy and zoning and green lining, red lining, they all go back so far. So I think what is cool about San Francisco is that there was like after the, like during World War II and World War I, a lot of Black people were here working and having like financial stability, working in the naval yards that were near like Bayview Hunters Point and stuff. And I don't know, I think that like growing up in Arizona, the population of Black people is so small, and then you want to think about the population of Black people that have access to like academic and financial like equality is even smaller. But I guess when I think about the history of San Francisco, I think about how big of a part the migration of like Black people from the South. A lot of people always think of them going to like the East Coast to work and stuff, but a lot of people actually came to the Bay Area. And then I think about how after the naval yards closed and Bayview Hunters Point, that area was kind of trashed environmentally, and the Black people were just like left there. I also think about redlining, where like Black and brown people weren't, and by brown I specifically mean like Chinese people, were only allowed to buy homes. And because one of the things I love about San Francisco is like how it used to be like each neighborhood, or like I guess they would say ethnic enclaves. But like, oh my God, I love like Chinatown or going to the Fillmore or going other places, but learning that like Chinatown exists because like Chinese people were not allowed to live anywhere else. Or like Bayview Hunters Point exists because black people were not allowed to buy homes. I forgot what it's called. There's a like name for the clause when and it was still in like deeds. If you look at old deeds in certain areas in San Francisco, it'll have that clause that like no black or Chinese people can buy that home or live in that neighborhood. So I also think about the huge impact of like, so Fillmore and Japantown are right next to each other, overlapping. And like, why is that? It's because when Japanese Americans and Japanese people living in the United States were sent to internment camps, then they basically moved all these black people in from the South directly into their homes. And like, we were working there, building our own lives and communities. And just how that, like, you know how that layer happens. Like, I don't even know if those people who came knew why those homes were empty. Or if they did, like, it's like, what can you do about it? This is my opportunity. And so then thinking about like urban planning, like the Geary corridor, like the big road that's Geary, like before they built that, like what the Fillmore looked like and what Japantown looked like when people came back, and that tension that can happen between black and brown people where it's like, oh shit, we're finally out of these camps and now all of these people are living in our homes and in our properties. And then, I don't know, I just think that there's always been a lot of like, because of like structures larger than us that ultimately serve white supremacy, it can create tension between like black and brown people. But when I think, I guess that's like, when I think of the history of San Francisco, I think of all of the music that came out of it, because like that was the first way that I really got to know the Bay Area, was through like Mac Dre and like other music. Like the music was so cool that everybody loved California, you know, like back in the 90s and stuff, and it still is. But I feel like in terms of like history, just sorry, I'm like babbling, is that when I moved to the Bay Area, like when I lived in Daly City, I rode my bike to work every day, Westfield Shopping Center. And then when I lived in San Francisco, I worked in San Francisco high schools and went to CCSF. And so it's always been important to me. Like now I live in Oakland and I work like up the street from my house with like young people. So that's just always been really important to me. Like I'm a regional type of person. Like I've only lived in Arizona. I lived in Texas for 2 years as a kid when my mom was locked up, and other than that, I've lived in California. Like I like to feel like a place is my home and I'm a part of it, and I respect the history. But it's been really like, I feel like when I moved to the Mission District, people looked down on me because they were like, the good days already passed. And like, you know, there's this resentment when people move there. But I think that I try not to say like, talk about how much San Francisco has changed, because one, I'm not from there and I don't know if that's really my place. And two, like, I feel like a lot of times when people promote this narrative, like, oh, it's just white techies now, or everything good about San Francisco is gone, that's actually like a bald-faced lie, because there's still plenty of black and brown people living there, and there's still people doing shit, and maybe they're not as prominent, but we can't be complicit in their erasure by saying that they're not there when they still are. And I just like, it's been interesting to see how the things that I saw happening in San Francisco are now happening in Oakland. And I don't understand, but a lot of my friends that are younger, they have a lot of like rage and anger and resentment because they literally like they can't afford to live where they like grew up, you know, and they don't know where they're gonna live. And so basically, like, I don't have much to say other than like I am very grateful to be here, and I'm grateful for the foundation that's been laid before me to just like have the beauty and the opportunities and the like programs and groups and creativity that I feel like is so unique to the Bay Area because of it being like a port city and because of like people coming here from the South from back in the day, and like people in West Oakland, like Black people were owning like most of the homes in the neighborhood, you know? And so I feel like a lot of times when people think about gentrification, they only focus on like quote unquote white techies, but a lot of techies are like also people of color, you know?
Yeah.
And so that is the thing and then they also don't think about the fact that like for some people selling the home that's been in their family for a couple generations might be their only opportunity or access to like wealth ever. So it's also people are cashing in because, you know, like what incentive are they given to like not sell their homes and stuff?